Hi folks, Florida Man here. One of the most common alliances in diplomacy is that between England and France. The Entente Cordiale, as this alliance is sometimes called, can begin as early as 1901, although it's not unusual for it to form any time within the first few years of a game. Because this alliance is so common, it's a matter of strategic interest to the viewers of this channel how this alliance works, what the pros and cons of this alliance are, how long it typically lasts, and whom it benefits most in execution. The alliance between England and France works, as you might expect, by starting out with an attack on Germany, the only common enemy the two powers share early on, and then continuing with eastward movement. The strength of the alliance is that if Germany is not supported by both Italy and Russia against England and France, which is generally unlikely, it's pretty difficult for Germany to withstand this storm for very long. On the flip side, there's also every possibility that an eastern power like Russia or Austria might sneak over to Germany to try and dot the German while the invasion of Germany is ongoing. So the likelihood of this alliance successfully defeating its early adversary is very high, as long as the players are steadfast and make rational orders. Within the first few years, it's typically relatively difficult for England to turn on France with success after having worked with France, unless Germany is an ally now against France. That's a pretty difficult needle to thread if you started the game by working with France against Germany. Italy is an alternative ally, but Italian weakness early on tends to weaken the prospect of success. If Italy isn't weak, it's frequently a cause for France to turn on England rather than trying its luck against Italy. France tends to remain relatively strong in the mid-game as well, but as the game goes on, and England's dominance in the English corner becomes more indisputable, the balance of power tends to shift, allowing for the possibility of a successful English stab leading into a solo. Conversely, a French stab in the early and mid-game is more likely to succeed than an English attempt, but it's much more likely to succeed with German or Russian help. Germany is a doubtful ally for the same reasons as mentioned previously, while Russia is often just as feeble in the north as Italy tends to be in the south. The primary beneficiaries of the Entente are naturally England and France. The longer the alliance lasts, the more England typically benefits. The sooner it breaks up after crippling or destroying Germany, the more France usually benefits, unless England was the one who violated the agreement. The big losers of the alliance are Germany, Italy, and Russia, typically in that order, while Austria or Turkey may benefit from a strong pair of Western powers, and Russia may end up benefiting if the alliance is very brief due to one of the members of the Entente stabbing the other once Germany is gone. The longevity of this alliance is dependent on the two players involved. If they're disciplined and want to remain united, there's no reason they can't go the distance all the way to the end. On the other hand, I think the norm is for it to break up sometime in the mid-game, whenever one of the two players gets their act together enough to be able to start a war with the other, without it being clearly self-destructive. With skillful and rational players, I tend to think the alliance will last a little longer than it usually does, although it's worth noting again that it isn't particularly in France's interest to take this all the way into the endgame, when typically England should have the advantage finally, unless France has just been played better and had greater success. Overall, the Entente Cordiale is one of the staple alliances of diplomacy for very good reason, potentially very stable, easy to put into action, and powerful enough that it can justifiably be called the Western Juggernaut. I definitely endorse playing it, if you're England and believe you can keep France from stabbing you before the mid-game, or if you're France and have a good plan to stab England before the latter parts of the game. If you're not sure about those factors, it can still be a very strong option, and I certainly think it's one worth considering. The major con of the alliance is that England and France will each probably have opportunities to stab each other, and there are no stalemate lines or strong defensive positions that can be maintained relative to each other, unless they're each willing to commit a relatively large number of units to holding out there and defending. Each player's security in the alliance depends very heavily on reading the other player's intentions and parrying any possible stab attempt at the moment it's attempted or beforehand. And the endgame of the Entente, like many alliances, is usually to be the person who stabs first and stabs best, and thereby wins the day against the enemy. This is just a bit more glaring with the Entente than it is in some other alliances, because a stab for France into English home centres, or for England into French home centres, is often only a season or two away. I hope you've enjoyed this strategic overview and found it to be of some value. If so, I hope you'll like, subscribe, and check out more Florida Man diplomacy videos. Please join me in thanking the folks whose names are now on screen. who have gone above and beyond to support the channel by either contributing to my Patreon or writing subtitles. And until next time, Florida Man, out.